All right, for this week's episode of Data and Confused, I'm actually on vacation. So instead of having our normal format of me interviewing somebody, it's going to be just me talking. And for today's episode, I want to talk about data independence, and specifically around this upcoming revolution that we're all experiencing in one way or another around AI. So what is data independence and what does that mean? Of course, it's going to mean different things to different people, but I think taking a step back to how things were way back in the era of the mainframe computer. So just bear with me here. So once upon a time when the computer revolution first started, businesses would have a computer, a mainframe computer, right? When I say businesses, I'm talking about large organizations. And this is where all their stuff would live, all their computing stuff. And at those times, computing was really expensive. So you only would, run the program to do the computing when you absolutely had to, because just it was at a premium to do that. But at that time, organizations would write their own software. And of course, they had their own data. And what does that mean? Like maybe that data was written down, and it definitely was written down manually in all kinds of different formats. But in terms of how the business ran, all the different components of these are the things that make our business unique and makes our business work, that was, of course, all contained within the business. But businesses would write their own software. So if you needed accounting software, they would write that software. If they needed some kind of word processing or, supply chain management, or what is the equivalent of an ERP system today. Of course, it was very rudimentary back at that time, but businesses would write their own software based on their data processes that they had, and it was all kept internally. That's important because they owned it, and they had the full sort of supply chain, if you will, of their internal operations contained within their organization itself. Now, this evolved over time because they had to hire maybe, an internal software developer, maybe a consultant from one of the companies like IBM that sold them these mainframes that helped them write the software. But nevertheless, they still owned the software, and they owned the mainframes as well. That's important because those at the time, that was a capital expense, and then you would just pay maintenance on it. Remember back in the day, we didn't have subscriptions for everything, right? It was capital expenses that we did, and you would just pay maintenance on these things. And then after that, we had the desktop revolution, right? So then we had this moving away from mainframes, and instead we had desktop software everywhere. And at that point, we started to standardize on different software platforms. Microsoft became very popular then. So instead of having all these different kinds of word processing programs, we all agreed to just, adopt one platform eventually, Microsoft Word for the most part, Microsoft Excel, and people would standardize on these as the formats in which their data was kept. It's kept in an Excel spreadsheet. It's kept in a Word document. Keep on going. And then we have other larger organizations that are built out like Oracle and SAP and PeopleSoft and things like this. So what do? They take these different software components that organizations were building themselves, and instead of building it, they went and bought it instead. Organizations thought, hey, this is too difficult, this is too expensive, this is too challenging for us to maintain software because we're just beholden to, the beardy guy in the corner who maybe his agenda and his ideas about how the software should be written don't align 100% with what the business objectives are. They have their own little fiefdom. But there's some politics around this. Instead, and then of course, we go golfing with people that work for these big software vendors. So eventually over time, we come convinced it's better to buy the software than it is to build the software. And so that was the next era then, was moving into this buy versus build. So what happens to your data at that point? Your data then gets moved into these systems. And it's still your data, but now it's stored in the proprietary formats of these software vendors. Hopefully you see where this is going now, right? So It's not easy to get your data out. If you want to migrate from one vendor to another, if you want to migrate from SAP to some other vendor, or even heck, migrate from SAP to a newer version of SAP, that in and of itself is a massive undertaking. It's a huge project to do these data migrations because it's all contained within these proprietary vendor systems. You don't own it anymore. You sort of own it, but you don't really own it. It's your data, but it's not really your data. Okay? Then we have the cloud revolution. So what happens with the cloud revolution is that instead of having a server that you're running on-prem, that's again still running software that you bought, you don't even do that anymore. So you instead move it to the vendor's cloud. And a lot of these vendors are forcing you to move to their cloud. You don't get to buy the software anymore. You don't get to own the software and pay maintenance on it. Instead, you have to use it in their cloud system instead. And now you have this additional dependency. Not only are you dependent on their proprietary format and stuck within their software ecosystem, now you're also stuck within their cloud ecosystem and hosting platform as well. Instead of having a capital expense that you pay maintenance on, which is just an incremental operating expense beyond that, now it's an ongoing operating expense. That matters a lot because those operating expenses seem to only be going up and up, right? And so we're promised these things of extra flexibility, extra convenience, but we end up getting is dependency and lock-in and people not having as much control over things, and really to the point where what is your business even making your business special anymore, right? The more and more that you adopt these different vendor systems, the more and more you're forced to use their best practices, and sometimes it can be helpful, but sometimes not, and you're relinquishing so much control for the convenience of being able to run on these different systems. I think where I'm going with this is now, is there, where does this lead? What is next after this? Well, of course, the next thing is AI. And with AI, what is the next logical progression in this? It is that not only will you not control your data, it's in a proprietary format, you won't control the hosting of the data, you have to use their cloud. Now you won't be able to control the AI component of that either, because you'll be forced to use the AI that the vendor gives you, by and large, and how the vendor ties that in with your AI. So, and then of course they're going to bill you additional price on whatever that is on top of it. Unless businesses draw a line in the sand, there's going to be a point where this is just going to become prohibitively expensive, I believe. And you're going to get to this situation of maybe the haves and the have-nots. Maybe some organizations have the money and they can just continue to spend wildly on these increasingly ballooning cloud expenses and AI expenses. Or there's going to be organizations that say, you know what, enough is enough. Like, have we got to the point now where we can finally say, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to pull some of this back on-prem and I want to do some of this myself. Is that even possible to do? And I would argue that now in the age of AI, it is actually possible to do this. And here's why. If you own your data, if you can take your data, even a small portion of that data back away from a vendor, or even a copy of that data to start with, and put it in a system that uses open formats, that uses open source, Apache Iceberg, for example, and you can transform that data in such a way that you have control of all of it. You're not dependent on independent software vendors anymore, right? You're pulling it back and you're saying, can we go back to this era of the mainframe where we control the code, we control the data, we use open source software, we use open formats like Apache Iceberg and put it in formats that we want. If at that point we can do that, now all kinds of things unlock. You can actually use AI to build applications and to recreate some of these things that you used to buy, that you're paying a premium, and not just a premium, it's like a premium on a premium on a premium, and build those things in-house instead. I think this is going to be possible. And we're actually doing some of this ourselves now, but I think this is going to be more and more possible. And I think organizations are going to push back, and they are going to say, we want to build versus buy instead. And I know that some of the studies have come out now saying that, AI is, a lot of these AI projects fail. A lot of these in-house projects fail. And I don't know the parameters around what that is and stuff. And I think that shouldn't deter you, right? If you're an organization that's like, we want to have ownership and control again, then don't let all of these stories and these statistics around AI projects failing deter you. Maybe a certain amount of failure is going to be required, but I think if you have leadership buy-in, if you have a focused project, and you have a clear objective of what it is that you're trying to do, I think that's perfect for you to have, we'll call it a skunkworks project, right? A specific project that has a specific outcome that you maybe have, just your own tiger team working on this thing, and is using something like Cursor or Claude Code, and they're learning, they're iterating, they're building whatever app it is that your organization would be able to utilize, that if you could build your own app in-house, that you could actually discontinue some SaaS service or start to pull away from some vendor dependency that you would otherwise have, right? I mean, just think about it. What if you could write your own SaaS software? What if you could own that piece? That would be something just your company used, and you wouldn't have to pay that ongoing price anymore for that SaaS software. What if you didn't need Salesforce? Okay, maybe that's too big of an ask to start with, but maybe a smaller SaaS software that you're using, just to prove that you can do it. This is what I'm talking about when it comes to data independence. I think once organizations realize that they actually do have the capacity now to start to think about these kinds of things, then the whole world unlocks to them, because we can go back to this era of what we had in the mainframe days. Not that we're going to have those limitations that we had, but of being able to own your code, own your data, own the software. I think that's going to, if you're able to do that, not only will your organization be able to save a lot of money, you'll actually have more control, more flexibility, and maybe even be able to be more competitive, because you'll be able to directly change your software to meet your business needs. Think about the power of what that would do. So any organization that wants to start to attempt something like this, I think they have to think of the data part of it first, and really thinking about how they can create an enclave or a special place where they can put data, even if it's just a copy of it to start with, that they can manage it and then kind of grow their projects from there. So I'm curious if your company is thinking about taking on a project like this, if your organization has experimented or had its own skunk work projects, how that has gone for you. Has that been successful? What failures have you had? What challenges have you had? What breakthroughs have you had? Without at least taking the first steps to be able to do this, I think you're just relinquishing control, and you're just hoping that whatever the software vendors and AI companies have in store for you, that it's going to be in your best interest. Probably not, but I think there's never been a better time for organizations to start to take some preliminary steps to figure out what this might look like for data independence. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm told now that we have a Discord channel for Data and Confused, so please go check out the Discord channel. There'll be a link about that as well. If you like this video, if you like what we're doing here in Data and Confused, please give us a thumbs up or a rating on whatever platform you're listening to. And I really appreciate you tuning in, and we'll be back soon with our programming of having our next guest on. So thank you so much.